Я подтверждение ситуации передаю на стройку. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, AK heads, we are back with another episode of the Talking Lead AK Corner, presented by Century Arms. We are in Season 2, and this is Episode 10 of 12. So we've only got 2 more months of the Talking Lead AK Corner, of all the goodness that you love each and every month that Brian and I have been bringing. You've only missed one episode this season, Brian, and I commend you for that, brother.
Well, thank you. I'm doing my best.
So Brian is with Occam Defense Solutions. He is the owner, proprietor. He started off with the RTS, is what got him into it, which is that, did I say it? Is it RST or RTS?
RST, the rear sight tower.
Rear sight tower, RST. And I've used that product. You've heard me talk about it. But since then, Brian's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well just go ahead and make a full AK. So that was the birth of the ODS 1775, which you leadheads can't seem to get enough of.
Yeah, thank you to all you guys, leadheads, that are really spreading the word there. We've got a big crew of you guys who seem to know each other in general, and we're just really grateful for the support. And they're also chill dudes. We don't like working with jerks, and we're blessed to not have any of them. So thank you, guys.
Well, if you're a member of the Lead Head Brigade, you're not a jerk. I mean, it's his number one rule. So the Lead Head Brigade takes care of each other. And they take care of our sponsors, so make sure you do that. Bringing you this each and every month is Century Arms. Unfortunately, they couldn't join us this episode, so we're going to miss Adam and the gang, Jay, Andrew, that typically join us. But to fill that gap, we had to bring somebody in extra special. And he is a returning guest to the Talking Lead podcast and the AK Corner. He was on last year's Season 1, Episode 11 with Vincent Buckles over at Mesa Kinetic Research. And he was also on one of our regular episodes. I bring you, ladies and gentlemen, from Utah, it's Mr. Jeff Kirkham. Welcome in, Jeff.
Hey, thanks, Marty. It's cool to be here again. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, man. There's been a lot that's happened since the last time that you were on, so we've got a lot of catching up to do with you. And, I mean, all the things that you're doing. You've got many irons in many more fires. So we're gonna talk about that, and we've got a cool topic that we're going to talk about. It's not really a topic, I don't guess, but it's more of a, I don't know, how would you describe it, Brian? Oh
gosh, it's some people's whole lives, but being a competent human would be how I would put it generally.
Exactly, and Jeff's done a whole line of fiction and nonfiction books on this, and we're going to get into that. But make sure you go and support the other sponsors of our show. Of course, Occam Defense Solutions. And Brian's got some news he's going to be dropping on you lead heads here a little bit later. IWI US, newest sponsors of the Talking Lead AK Corner. They're joining us here for the last 4 episodes this month. And I'm sure that they're going to continue that in months to come. So make sure you go show IWI some love. US Palm, the magazines, the grips. U.S. Palm has given out, I don't know how many dozens of magazines to you lead heads over these past 9 months, but I know a lot of you have won those, and they've got a new translucent and it was an FDE mag that they've got out now with the U.S. Palm. So go check them out. And then, of course, Red Army Standard for your food for your AK-47. I know my ODS 1775 loves the Red Army Standard, red box and white box both. The red box being their premium, and I've been getting a little better performance out of the red box than the white box. But since you and I talked last, Brian, I haven't had a chance to take it out. There's just weather and traveling and all that. But this week, I've slated one day this week to go out and then do some more of my, like our last month's episode was about obtaining the precision from the AK. I'm going to go do some more precision shooting with my AK.
Yeah, we've been playing with that ACSS second focal plane reticle from Primary Arms that we talked about in that show. Mm-hmm. And I'm an enthusiastic supporter of it now. Out of 8 guns that I tested last Friday, 4 of them I got to test because they didn't order sights. I got to use the ACSS on it, and every one of them I got 2 bullets in 1 hole.
Wow. And you're doing your test from how far?
50 yards.
50 yards?
Yep. And so, they're stupid accurate. That sight is, or the optic is just great. I really like it. So, so far holding up great under recoil, no issues.
Yeah. I think since that episode, they had a run on on their scopes there, and they were supposed to send me one, but they sold out. So I haven't had a chance to test it yet, but I'm looking forward to that. As I've been letting everybody know, I'm taking mine out. I'm setting up for hunting, Jeff. I'm going to do a hunting build with my ODS 1775. I'm going to take down some deer and some hogs and whatever else might wander through my sights, as long as it's legal, as long as it's in season.
It'd be cool to get the feedback on that and see what you think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So make sure you go back to last episode if you didn't get a chance to listen to that. As Brian said, Primary Arms was on there. We talked about their line of scopes and optics that they have specifically for the 7.62 by 3.9 round. And as Brian said, apparently they're spot on. So go check those out. We had our good buddy Jared from 212 Training Group was on, and he was talking about the training classes that they have. I think they had to postpone one or something due to the COVID. But as far as I know, he's still got his other ones scheduled, and he's doing the training all across the United States. Isn't he doing one up in your neck of the woods?
We're looking at April for that. We decided to push it from this fall just because we're coming up on the election, and it's just things are weird. And
they're doing specific AK training courses, so using the AK-47. But they'll train with anything: handguns, rifles. Just a top-notch outfit there out of Texas. Jared at 212 Training. Make sure you go show them some love. And then, of course, Adam and Brian joined us on the last episode, too. So this episode, Jeff Kirkham, I'm going to get it right this time, too, 29 years plus, veteran, Green Beret, inventor of the Rats Tourniquet, co-founder, Ready Man Network, author of the Black Autumn post-apocalyptic book series. You can find those on Amazon. I guess you can probably go to Ready Man. They're probably on Ready Man too. You can find that list of books. And then he's got some books on being prepared. Hit me with those names real quick.
We've got the Bug Out series that we wrote. It's a graphic instructional manual. So it's kind of done in cartoon style. That's available on Amazon. Let me see. That we've got the Black Autumn series where we've got the anthologies that are on there. So we've got Black Autumn, Last Air Force One, Black Autumn Travelers, Black Autumn Conquistadors, and then the Black Autumn anthology. That's a group of short stories that we put together, and all of those have lessons in there. Black Autumn started as a wargaming exercise, where it was just me and Jason. Jason and I wrote it together, and it started out as kind of like in the movies when you have one of those ongoing chess games between the two guys. Well, this was essentially an ongoing chess game that every time we get together, it'd be like, well, what do you think could happen? And if that happened, then what would the fallout of that be? And at some point, I think it was Jason said, man, we should write this into a novel. So we did. And so
nice.
Essentially it was a bunch of stuff that we hadn't until we started digging into it. I mean, that's why the military war games, because it allows you to explore the what ifs. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. And so it's kind of our take of what could happen. And it's eerily, it's eerily similar to stuff that has already happened, is continuing to happen. Actually, the sequel is called White Wasteland, and we haven't released it yet. We're in the middle of a re-edit of it, and it starts, kind of a spoiler alert, but it starts with H1N1, the flu, coming through and wiping out a whole bunch of people in wintertime right after the first 17 days. So, and about the time we're getting ready to release it is when COVID was hitting. And so we were like, we'll get it, and, we'll probably hold off on releasing it. So, yeah, there's lots of lessons to be learned there. And then And then I've written a couple of leadership manuals for the leadership and planning manuals that are military. So anybody that has a hard time falling asleep at night, you can grab one of those books and it'll put you right out.
I'm sure that's not the case. But you also have some survival and preparedness books out. Beginner Emergency Survivor Preparedness, How to Prepare for Emergency, Job Loss, or a Total Collapse. And then you've got the 365 days.
Well, that's unlocking there. I'll just jump in that the Rats Tourniquet, while it's great and I carry one every day and give them to friends and family and trust my life to them, that's like one of Jeff's lesser inventions. The stack of inventions and patents that he has to his name is crazy. And there's one that I won't describe at all in detail, but physicists told him it was physically impossible. And then he showed them that the thing worked.
Well,
and he showed me how we got to talking one night, and the brilliance.
My interest.
I don't know that I can say what it is, but it's really cool. And just take it from one trained physicist that he's got a very strange and wonderful brain.
So our lead heads are familiar with the Rats Tourniquet. We gave several of those away through your generosity from the last show when we were doing, I think it was our 5th year, 6th year, I don't know what it was, some celebration we did, and you were generous enough to offer up several of those Rats Tourniquets, and they got out to several of our lead heads. So thank you for that. But if they haven't had an opportunity, where can they go and check out the Rats Tourniquet?
You can actually pick them up right off of readyman.com. We've got them on there. So, I mean, that's a great place to go.
I think at the time you had about 50 first-hand account stories of people using those. Has that grown since then? I know you were looking for more stories from people.
We're well over 100 now. I just interviewed a guy 2 weeks ago. He himself had 3 saves. He was a search and rescue. He's a former SEAL. And then he's a search and rescue guy down in around the Grand Canyon. And he applied 2 on one person in a car wreck, and then another one on another person in a car wreck, saved their lives, applied 1 to a leg of a girl that was in a helicopter crash. So helped keep her alive so she could get to the hospital. I mean, unfortunately, she was burned very badly, and so she ended up passing away. But at least she got to the hospital long enough. She died I think it was a couple of weeks later from the complications from the burns. But
gave her a fighting chance, though.
Yeah, got her a fighting chance. Yeah, absolutely. And then we just had another save up in Ogden City. Somebody had gotten stabbed with a knife and used a tourniquet on him to save his life. So yeah, we're a little over 100 now of the ones that we know of, saves that we know of.
Very good. So if you guys have any stories that you want to share with Jeff, if you've had the misfortune to use the Rats Tourniquet, but fortunately for somebody that you had it, where can they go and share those stories?
Hey, they can just email me. Just email info@readymanteam.com or email me, Jeff@readymanteam.com, and blast them over. I'd love to see them. There's nothing more, out of all of my inventions and stuff. I think the one that I get the most, self-fulfillment out of is when I hear the stories of people. Like, I talked to a guy, it's been about a year ago, so I don't think you knew about this one, Marty, is a father and son were out deer hunting. Dad was in a tree stand, son was back at the camp, and the tree stand collapsed, so Dad fell out of the tree, shoved his tib fib through the right side of his ankle. Dad had a heart condition, so he's on blood thinners. Obviously severed tons of vessels down in the bottom of his foot, at the side of his foot. Started screaming for his son. So his son thought that he was being attacked by a mountain lion or something. I don't know. Lions in Missouri. He thought he was being attacked. So he went sprinting off with his pistol and left his med kit back at the camp and got to his dad. And his dad was like, "Hey, do you have that tourniquet in your pocket you always do?" And he was like, "Yeah." He just so happened, he's like, "I carry your tourniquet every single day," pulled it out of his pocket, stuck it on his dad's leg to keep him from bleeding out because of the blood thinners he was on.
Yeah.
And then It was about 2 or 3 hours. I think it was about an hour and a half to 2 hours before they got him out of there to an ambulance where he could get to a hospital. Made a full recovery, but dad,
great.
son saving dad's life. Pretty humbling on my part to talk to that guy. It was just super cool moment.
That happens probably more times than we hear about, as far as the tree stands, the deer stands, people falling out of those, or they breaking and falling, and because people sometimes will leave those up year after year, and then those wraps they deteriorate after time, and sure enough, boom, that's going to happen. But that's a great story, especially with hunting season coming up.
Yeah, broadheads, especially for you bow hunters out there, that's a super common way for people to die while hunting. Is they'll slip and they'll have an arrow unguarded in some way and slit their femoral or something like that and get into a real bad way. So really, Jeff's tourniquet is so small and so unobtrusive. There's just no excuse not to be having one.
Yeah. We actually, another one of our saves is from a broadhead. Actually, 2 of our saves are from that one, and there was no kind of interesting stories. The first one was a guy was looking for a tool behind his toolbox, and there was a broadhead back there, and he shoved it through his wrist, cut the break, or cutting the radial artery. Happened to have my tourniquet there, and then the other one is a guy was walking across a grass field, and there was a broadhead sticking was laying in the grass, and so it ended up punji staking him through the leg. So he wasn't shot. Man. He walked into it and put it right through his leg. Happened to have my tourniquet with him and put it on his leg, and then got back to where he could get medical attention. So, weird, strange. What's interesting to me is like the number of saves that we have. Very few of them have anything to do with violence. Maybe less than 10.
Accidents.
They're accidents. I mean, we had a guy. We just had another one. I start talking about it. I'm remembering we had another one where a guy was splitting wood with a wedge. So he had a wedge and a sledgehammer, and he was splitting wood. He hit the wedge. The wedge had started to mushroom on the top. He hit the wedge. A piece of the wedge flew off, hit him in his radial artery, started pouring blood everywhere, and they happened to, one of the guys that came by to help happened to have a tourniquet, have one of my rats on him, and threw it on his arm and saved that guy's life, took him to the hospital.
Damn.
Yeah, that's the only other place I've heard of that happening is with climbers, aid climbers, or hammering in pitons into rock, and they'll be real close to that piton. They pull them when they leave, but if you let them mushroom too far, that same thing I've heard of happening there. So sounds like advice to be grinding down the mushroom as it starts to occur.
Yeah,
definitely.
So the reason we're talking about this, and it's going to lead into our main topic here. This is the AK corner. This isn't the tourniquet corner, but I mean, this is great information, and our listeners, I guarantee, are eating this up. But it's about being prepared and prepping in today's society with the coronavirus and the civil disorder that's going on. The other book that I didn't mention was 365 Days of Survival. It's the Ready Man edition. Foundational critical thinking and skills for personal security, travel security, and survival. With what's going on, people are thinking this is the apocalypse, the end of the world, and with businesses being shut down, people haven't been able to go, get their normal supplies of groceries and fuel and, all the normal. A lot of people found that they weren't prepared for something like this, even though they thought they might have been. And, what we want to talk about today, Jeff's got some great stories on prepping, but he's also got some great information on why the AK and the AK platform makes a great survival weapon. So with that, let's turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks. Yeah, we'll probably just start right there with the AK, and part of the reason why I think it's a great platform, I carried that for folks that don't know. I spent a ton of time in combat zones. Over the space of about 13 years, I racked up about 8 years over there, and doing combat operations. The whole time I was over there, I carried an AK just because I had fallen in love with a platform and simplicity. I was also embedded with Afghans and Iraqis that were they were using AKs. So I thought it only made sense to use what they were using.
And for you guys who haven't listened to Jeff on our episodes before, go back to episode 296 and 299, and he goes into more detail about his time over in Iraq and Afghanistan.
And I think if you look at now, why is the AK? I think a great, a great rifle for emergency preparedness. First and foremost, if you look at the way that the rifle, you look at the men who developed the rifle. They had just come out of World War II. It was still in the late 40s. The Soviets had lost estimates of anywhere between 20 and 30 million people. Every single Russian was affected by World War II in a bad way. Yeah. And Stalin in the late 40s, Stalin had two things that he put emphasis on. Well, three. One was maintaining power. Two was nukes. And three was an assault rifle that later became the AK-47. And that rifle was developed by men who had fought the Waffen-SS on the Eastern Front. So probably one of the finest mechanized infantry armies that has ever been in warfare was the Waffen-SS. Their politics and the horrific nature of those guys aside, they were very good. And they were just running. I think the body count at one point was like 60-1 from Germans to Russians. But the problem they ran into was that because the Germans had decided to invade, they got hit with winter. And so now all of a sudden, put yourself in these guys' mindset, right? Men were starving to death. They were freezing to death. Everybody's seen the movies where it's like one guy got ammo, the other guy got a rifle. And if you weren't going to charge, then the commissar would shoot you in the head with a Makarov. And so, ready, set, go, and charge. Well, these men had come out of that and said, okay, we need a rifle. And this goes into why I think it's a great option for emergency preparedness. It was designed to work when there was no resupplies. It was designed to work when other people were starving, or there wasn't oil, or there wasn't some of the other stuff. It was designed to work when it was freezing cold and in the mud. All of that was designed. And it's like, the more that I dig into that rifle, the more I'm just amazed at the genius of the simplicity of it, and how much thought went into it. Stalin was in a unique position to where he was worried about the Americans coming in. That was the Fulda Gap scenario. If you were ever in the military in the 80s, we would train for the Fulda Gap because that was where the Russians were going to come screaming through to invade Europe. And so that was the scenario. Well, Stalin was sitting at a time where it's like, I need a rifle that I can compete with mechanized infantry, advanced mechanized infantry. But he was also scared of training his soldiers too much because it was a conscript army. You wanted just enough that you could win, but not enough that they could all of a sudden return and take power. And so the rifle was designed that way. That's why I tell people the AK is actually more ergonomic than any of the other rifles that are out there, because it was designed to be put into the hands of a conscript, but still be able to keep up with a modern mechanized infantry. And it's a fantastic platform. It's 30 cal. I mean, you can get it in any caliber just about now, but 30 cal seems to be the sweet spot for, knocking men down, as well as, so you can kill a deer with it and you can kill a man with it. So it's a great platform.
Yeah. And you don't get the over penetration either. So, that's a good aspect of it. Now, if you ask Marco Vorobiev, he'll say the 545. Remember that, Brian?
Yeah, sure.
Do you know Marco, Jeff?
I do not. What did he say about the 545?
I just we were talking about how great the 7.62-39 is, and he goes, he's a former Spetsnaz, and he's a historian, knows a ton about not just AKs but all firearms. He's a very smart guy, but he was just like, I respectfully disagree. The 545 is my preferred, and he just went on a little rant about it, but.
Well, the 545, in some respects, I would agree with him. And bear with me here a second. The 545 was developed. Actually, that round was developed about the same time as the 7.62 was developed. The short little round, and the Soviets decided they're like, that bullet's too small. They were messing with bullets that were higher velocity, and then Vietnam came around and they saw the Americans with the M16s in Vietnam, and they're like, okay, small round probably has a place here, and so they started up continued and finished the development of the 5.45. Now the 5.45 is a wicked round if you're doing CQB or you're doing close end fighting. I mean, it is in Afghanistan, the Afghans called it the poison bullet. If you watch gel blocks of it, because it has 3 millimeters of hollow space under its nose cone, it does a double 90 yaw as it's going through a gel block. When it hits a man, it's just devastating because all of a sudden it's yawing.
Puts the brakes on.
Exactly.
Skids.
I mean, it's so, so that it's a great round. I mean, it doesn't kick hardly at all. It's like you're shooting a 22. But as far as like an all around, a 30 cal, you need something that can smash through cover. Do you know what I mean? So that yaw all of a sudden starts to give you problems depending on what type of warfare you're having. If you need to start shooting through cover like trees and brush and cars, all of a sudden the 5.45, they try to make up with that with a steel core, but it still yaws and you're still bleeding that energy off. And so that's where the 30 cal, it's like we seem to keep going back to the 30 cal because it just seems to be the sweet spot for that stuff.
Yeah, it's like a hammer.
Well, that's where it gets into what the perfect rifle is, and there isn't one. It's really dependent on what your mission is. And so if you're in a dense neighborhood and you're really worried about shooting your neighbor's kids by accident, if you overpenetrate through your house while you're whacking a bad guy, then 5.45 might be a way better solution. But if we're talking about the prepper round where you need to be able to push through cover and maybe punch through a car and torch some bad guys, then you get back to Jeff's point on 30 cal.
Yeah. Well, I think in an apocalyptic world too, you're not going to be worried about overpenetration.
Exactly. Yeah. So defining the mission profile, as it were, is I think an important context for what Jeff's talking about with the all around grid down, getting everything done kind of gun.
And you had talked about this a little bit in the prior episodes, Jeff. It's the type of ammo that you use too. If you've got that, is it tungsten core? Then you're going to get that over penetration. But I guess most of the AK rounds aren't going to have that steel core.
Most of it, there is some rounds that are out there, but more and more because the popularity of the 7.62 by 39 is popped up. There are a variety of rounds that are available. I just saw some hollow points that somebody was making, so you're getting some alternatives that you don't necessarily have to worry about junky old, former Soviet bloc mass-produced, garbage ammo and which probably when people talk about inaccuracy and stuff, I mean, if you're shooting garbage ammo, your accuracy goes to hell. But yeah, there's more and more options out there now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Our friends at Defiant Munitions, who I don't think I've necessarily introduced you to, Jeff, make a machined solid copper hollow point that is just nasty and very accurate. And it does amazing things to gel and also to four-legged critters. I have no personal experience on the two-legged variety, but what it does to hogs is pretty special.
It's special. I like the way he says that. So let's kind of rewind a little bit. So the AK, what makes it the perfect prepper's gun, post-apocalyptic, whatever you want to call it. Ergonomics was kind of one of the things you were touching on. Did we get all the ergos that you wanted to hit on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, and this is like an ongoing debate in the, kind of in that demographic with emergency preparedness. There's a pretty good argument to be said that, an AR platform is the way to go because there's just so many spare parts that are out there, and there's so much ammo that's available that's out there. So I mean, that's a super valid argument. You look at you look at a good AK. I mean, the thing will probably never break on you, and if it does, it's probably not that difficult to fix. I mean, we had AKs that were stamped made in 1953 that we were pulling off the battlefield in Afghanistan, and they worked great. As a matter of fact, I had one, and it was my PT rifle that I would go do PT with out on the, when I'd go work out on the range, and it was a 1953 milled receiver AK that shot just, it shot great, and I never cleaned it and whatnot. It's just kept going, never had any problems with it. So, there's an argument to be made. There was somebody else had a great argument for shotguns because you can do so much with a shotgun. I was like, okay, I'll buy that. So, and I think probably the point to take away from overall is, it can be the best rifle in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, you haven't trained with it, you don't know the nuances of it, then it's not the best rifle in the world for you. It's like what I tell people with tourniquets is the Rats Tourniquet the best tourniquet? You know what? The best tourniquet is the one that you have on you at the time and when you need it, and whatever that is, whether it's mine or somebody else's, it's the same thing with rifles. Make sure that and just because you put a rifle in somebody's hands doesn't make them a rifleman. You got to get out there and shoot the thing and train with it and make sure that it even functions, and learn the nuances of that. But I will say that when we've had students and we'd run them through an M4 course when I was in the mill with people that were, basically admin folks that had to get qualified before they'd head over, we would do a familiarization class that was like a day or, less than a day with the AK. And all of them could pick it up and were immediately accurate on the targets. And that's a testament to the ergonomics of the rifle. I've got like a 3-hour class that I've teach from time to time that's all about the AK and its internal workings and its history and all of that stuff, and just some of the little nuances that I've discovered that I don't believe are hapstance. I believe were absolutely designed by those men that they survived fighting on the Eastern Front, and so they built all that stuff in there purposely.
Now I think it was you that had mentioned this where you were over there. You would find AKs obviously laying around, but you were just amazed at like how they made the parts from just whatever they had laying around. The car parts or whatever, the receivers made out of just spare metal that they had from whatever they could get.
One of the guys that taught me a lot about AKs was this hillbilly from the mountains of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And if you looked at the guy, you would think, man, did this guy even graduate elementary school? But as soon as you started talking to him about AKs, it was like, man, get out your notebook and your pencil, because this guy, unbelievable knowledge in the internal workings and the geometry of what was taking on. And his first AK that he'd ever built, he had snuck into his house. He was poor. He's living in a cabin, and he had old garage that was a shed where he'd do his gun stuff. He snuck into the house and stole one of his wife's cookie sheets. And
that's what it was, yeah.
And bent that into a receiver and made his first AK. And he told me, he was like, that's when he really fell in love with it, because he was like, I'll be damned, this is a great design. It's and he was like, it wasn't anything beautiful that he put together. He's like, but man, this thing was working. And that's where people say that AKs are rat traps, and that's why they're reliable. I think that's anything but the truth. I believe that the design is good enough that even though you've got rat trap manufacturers out there, it still works and continues to work. And once you get a good AK that's locked in, like what Brian's making up there at Occam Defense, man, it is a thing of beauty. Like, I've bought 2 AKs from Brian, pistols, and they are my favorite rifles that I've got in my in my safe, and love to take them out and shoot them. They're just a blast to shoot and easy to, they're just fantastic.
Well, and thank you, Jeff. That's kind of you to say. The one of the best innovations I've seen for the AK is something that Jeff came up with, and he told me about, and I thought he was crazy when he first said it, but he's like, yeah, take a Spam can opener and cut 3 inches of it off or so and weld that onto the right side of the mag well. And it is a performance enhancement like you won't believe. And I'm like, okay. And I talked to a really good welder, and he says, that guy's crazy. And I was like, well, I'm not a good enough welder. And then I found a guy who was crazy enough to do it, and we tried it, and it worked phenomenally well. And it's called the Curcum Shelf, and it lets you index an AK mag, kind of like how the FAL does. It just gives you a registration point. And what's crazy about it is that it improves both beginner and competitor performance dramatically. My competitors, like Jared from 212, he shaved a second off of his reload time, which for competition is a huge deal. And when I put the shelf, one of our guns with the shelf on it in the hands of a rank beginner, they can just see the mag. It just works. It's like they've been practicing for 2 hours, and so it rarely can you buy performance. But that invention there is a performance upgrade for everybody. We offer that as an option. We don't advertise it heavily, but you lead heads for sure. We'll put one on for you.
And I've got one on mine. Mine came with one, and
that's right.
When it came, I was like, okay, I haven't seen this before, and I mean, I kind of guessed what it was for. I was like, this is obviously something to help with the reload, and of course, I had to call you just to make sure. But
yeah, you were initially like,
I was a little skeptical. Yeah, I was a little skeptical about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But since I've used it, I definitely. I mean, once you take it out and you use it once, you'll figure it out. It makes a lot of sense after you put it in use. But I'm glad you put that on there. I wasn't expecting that. That was a nice addition.
You told me to make the nicest one I knew how to do. So
I did.
So when I first met Brian, he showed me his rail, because my rifle that was over, that I carried overseas, I had an X-47 rail system on it. They'd last, a couple of years, and then the screw, the threads would
start wearing out.
It'd come loose, and it wouldn't hold the zero stuff anymore. And so I'd throw it away and buy a new one and put it on. And so anyways, I saw Brian's, and I was always trying to figure out ways. I was constantly, the unit I was in, we could modify our guns, and it wasn't like regular mill where somebody would have a conniption if you did that. Like, we'd cut off barrels routinely and just modify stuff, trying to make it better for doing low-vis operations or full-blown assaults or whatever. And so my rifle that I had overseas looked essentially like a Draco, and so I had modified that, and I'd put a shelf on it. I was a weapons guy in Special Forces, and I was familiar with the FAL, and I was like, I wonder if I could do that with an AK. And so I did. And like what Brian was saying is, I went down to our welders that was in our unit, because we had internal mechanics and welders, this little Afghan dude, and I was like, hey man, I need a piece of metal welded on right here. And so he went over, grabbed a Spam can, and he was like, yeah, I got a piece of metal right here. Cut off the the tuna can opener, cut a piece of that off, got a stick welder, welded it on there. It looked like, some juvenile had done it with bubble gum. And I was like, okay, hopefully this doesn't blow up on my face. Took it out to the range, shot it. I was like, that's perfect. Cleaned up the welds a little bit more, deburred the inside. And I carried that series for, 10 years is what I did. And I think there's, it's a game changer. I mean, reloading right-handed or left-handed, reloading in the dark. Did he Cerakote yours yellow on the inside, Marty?
No, was he supposed to have done that?
Yes.
I think there's
my Cerakoter. You wanted Tiger Stripe too, and he said that's too many things. He doesn't get the zombie green.
No.
Yeah.
I think there's a penis on the inside of mine.
That is true, and yeah, we have sufficient respect for Master Sergeant Kirkham here that we don't put cocks on his, but yeah, other folks definitely get some artwork in special places. Yeah,
yeah, I got the big cock on mine, so that was special too. I said I wanted the best, so there you go.
There you go.
So back to our prepper mindset here. We were talking about the cookie sheet. So in my mind, any gun that you're able to, go to your kitchen and fashion parts for, which I don't know any parts for the AR that you can do that with. I mean, that's got to be like a +5 in my post-apocalyptic prepping mindset.
I've got a when I give my class on AKs, when the students are walking in, there's one of the pictures that's there is an AK leaning up against the side of a Humvee, and there's a shovel handle, the end of a shovel, the T-grip that's on shovels is jammed into the back, and that's the stock. And and when the students come in, they, and I do that purposely. When they come in, they're laughing and they're kind of pointing at it, and they sit down, and and then I go through the class, and and about however many slides in, I'm like, yeah. So when we start talking about robustness and a means of being able to fix stuff, I was like, this guy fixed his AK with a shovel. Can you do that with your rifle? And if the answer is no, then then we need to start critically looking at, it's like, okay, well, is this the best thing? If we're talking like no spare parts, grid down, can I fashion something? And we would see stuff overseas. I've got another picture that where somebody turned an AK, like an AK-47, into a bolt action. That's a pretty interesting picture that they put it together. It's just, there's so many modifications that I've seen from these things, that from guys in the mountains of Pakistan, basically an anvil is a rock, and bending these things into shape and putting them into service. Are they gonna hold a minute of angle, less than a minute of angle? No, they're not. I mean, are they still gonna fail from time to time? Yeah, because they're using crap materials. But the point is, you can use crap materials and have loose tolerances, and the design works in spite of that.
Yeah, I mean, make it work good enough until you can get somewhere to get something that works better. Fight your way to something better. But that's what in my mind, to be able to do that, that's like a huge plus for the the prepper mentality. I would think that would be something that would be key first on their mind, is like, all right, parts. Not going and finding another AR, because that's what a lot of people's argument is like, well, there's so many AKs, I can go find one lying around. Well, I don't know that I've ever seen any lying around here in America anywhere. I haven't walked down the street and tripped over one, or anything like that. Maybe in Chicago you can do that, but not here in Tennessee. But I mean, I understand, like, they're around, and if you have to go raid or whatever, you can find them and you can get parts. But to be able to use a shovel, a cookie sheet, parts from a car, whatever, to patch or keep your gun running until you do find that scenario, I think that's huge.
And Jeff, let me ask you a question here. My personal philosophy on prepping, there's no, well, I'll just say it briefly, I guess. Mao Zedong wrote, before he came to full power, wrote an insurgency manual. And in it, he talks about the difference between invaders and insurgents. The invaders have to truck all of their supplies in, and the insurgents just have to kill a few of the invaders, and then they get their supplies for free. And that's a bit like how I personally have my personal plan with prepping if things go really bad, is that I don't need 100,000 rounds of AK ammo. Like, let's say there's a depot by me or something, or there's some pile of ammo. Not that I'm going to go out and invade it, but if I have to run across bad people that are trying to do harm to me, I intend on putting them in the dirt and picking up what they have. And so is that a sound idea, to not be worried about fighting 10 years with one gun, but in having a really robust gun with a reasonable amount of ammo, and knowing that after a certain point, I'm going to be covered by whatever I pick up?
Well, first and foremost, what we tell folks is, don't get in gunfights. Avoid. Because once the bullets start flying, it doesn't matter how good you are. You can be, James Yeager, Chris Costa, any of the guy, but the bad guys do win from time to time. Weird stuff happens. Bullets ricochet. Who knows? So the first thing we tell people is, don't get into gunfights. Don't get into fights. You're just, Jeremy Horn actually said that. I asked him one time. I was interviewing Jeremy Horn, the UFC legend, and I was like, Jeremy, he's very accomplished pistol guy, and I asked him, I said, Jeremy, give me 5 moves that everybody should learn. And he sat there and he kind of thought for a little bit, and he was like, don't get in fights, buy a gun, learn how to use it, and don't get in fights. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
and this is like one of the most competent man with his hands and feet, that the world has ever seen. He's definitely in the top 100 fighters. So with that point is like, where do you need to be? There's an argument for ammo because it's great for barter, barter and trade. So you could use it for that. The more supplies that you have at your house, this was an interesting thing that we thought of, or we learned from writing Black Autumn. And what that was is you have to have a community, and vital to survival. And actually went back and did a bunch of historical research on it and figured out what the size of most of the tribes were, or many of the tribes that were surviving, and not just surviving but thriving, how big they were, how big they weren't, and how important. A reoccurring theme that we had in Black Autumn was like, because there's a big battle at the end of Black Autumn, and between criminals and the homestead, and they've got to go through several different communities, suburbia, to get to the homestead. That was their mission that they were trying to attack. And from that, it was like, holy cow! First and foremost, you can't do all this stuff yourself. Second of all, you've got to build your community, and your community starts with your family. And so if your wife or your kids are weak links, they're going to slow you down. And it's like this whole myth of the lone wolf's going to go and live in the mountains and be able to survive. It ain't going to happen. The mountain men didn't even do that. The mountain men would still go in and trade with the Indians and come back in for supplies and whatnot. And then keep in mind, there's a whole bunch of other people that are going to be up there looking for, deer and other stuff up there too. And so, and then it's building your community and building your neighborhood around you, because now all of a sudden you start building that tribe and that group of people that can come together for mutual work, mutual support, mutual defense, and all of that. No one person can do it all, even a couple of people. And what we found was, it looks like about anywhere from 100 to 200 people, 150 seems to be kind of the sweet spot of, you've got enough people that you can get work done, you can get its defense done. If somebody gets sick, it's not going to take out all of the work reserves, or somebody gets injured, they twist their ankle or something as mundane as that. And then, but it's not so many that you've got so many mouths you can't feed them. Right. And so, and that's if everybody's firing on full cylinders. So more to your point, Brian, is like, it's better that if you can, and that's where your subject matter expertise is, a little bit better to put that in there. But that's also why we created the Plan to Survive, which is an interactive checklist where you can go through, where we're like, hey, it's a visual representation of where you may be in your emergency preparedness, and it's highly customizable. I mean, if you live in Idaho, you don't care about, hurricanes, and so it doesn't hit you with the hurricane section on there. And if you're living on a budget, we're not suggesting that you buy a $150 holster, for your pistol. It's like, hey, maybe you should get the Phobos, and just because you've got 100,000 rounds of ammo in your basement, but you've never been to training, guess what? You're a level 5 over here, but you're a level nothing over here. So you better start spending some money on there. And so the Plan to Survive is kind of our crown jewel with Ready Man, to help people get prepared. And we're actually in the process of rebuilding that entire thing right now too, and tying in videos and Amazon links, so you don't have to buy it from us or other stuff. You can just go straight to Amazon and have it in 2 days in Prime, and continue to build up your emergency preparedness.
Is that a course that you offer also?
We haven't offered the Plan to Survive course yet, but that's a great idea though, Marty. Was where we could go through. There's a lot. It's about 1,700 pieces of equipment and skills that you go through and you mark off. It's like a big interactive checklist. There's a way that you can communicate securely with people on there as well, so you can build your community, which is so important. But it's that visual representation. I know that when I started going through it, I definitely was like, oh, okay, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. We need to make sure we do that, and we're continuing to expand it too. So we're adding a few other categories based off of recent events that will expand Plan to Survive and get more information out to folks.
You know what's interesting, looping back around to your community number there with, I forget, you said 100 to 200 or 150 being the sweet spot. I believe it's called the Dunbar number. And there's a biologist that was looking at the average troop or herd size or whatever it's called for primates.
Herd.
And figured out the different sizes of these stable communities. And I think the Dunbar number for humans is like 120 or something. That's the number of humans you can reasonably know and interact with, know by sight, know, like where you can really actually know the person. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting that your number crosses with that number. And I learned that firsthand when I first sort of got red pilled. I just sold part of a startup and had some extra cash. And so I kind of dropped out and started farming and homesteading. And you go straight to mental illness if you try and do that alone. And if you are lucky if you can grow enough food for yourself full time with your wife helping, and or skilled, or it's a big deal. And so very quickly you're forced to reach out and meet other homesteaders and farmers, and it's way better to do that before hard times hit. And so what you're saying rings very true for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, we went back, we looked at the average size of Afghan tribes, Arab tribes, Indian tribes, and over and over again, we kind of saw this common denominator. It's a governance thing. When you're the chief or the king or the emperor or whatever, it is that guy's calling the baron or the duke. It's a big enough number that you've got some power that you can wield to, make sure that marauders aren't going to come after you. But it's not so big that you can't control it. And about the time you get bigger than that, that's when you'd see the tribes start to split off.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting. There's a group of, they're sort of like the Amish. They're called the Hutterites. And there's a bunch of them in Alberta. I think they're in the U.S., some places as well. But they're a communal Amish-like thing where they all live in sort of, dorms. And then when they get big enough, they draw straws effectively, and half of the group gets kicked out to start another commune. Yeah, and it would be really interesting to know what their number is for that system, because they're still relying on they're still relying on civilization for those communes, but for governance and all the rest, another interesting little community there.
And if you've got about 150, we'll say 200, we keep the numbers easy. We've got 200 people, how many of them can defend, can fight? Do you know what I mean? And so you could probably cut that number right in half, because you've got kids, you've got sick people, you've got older people, you got people that just flat out don't know what they're doing. So you could cut that number in half and then probably subtract, like another 20% or so, we'll say 25% to keep the numbers pretty simple. So now all of a sudden you've got 75 people that can fight. Well, I can tell you, having been in the war, if you're going against 75 guys, I don't care how big your force is, you have to have a massive force, because in the U.S. military, the matrix is 3-to-1. You don't get in fights with anybody. I mean, if you get ambushed, you don't have a choice, but you don't get into fights with anybody unless it's a 3-to-1 advantage when you're going in there. So now all of a sudden you start doing the math on that. They've got to come up with about 300 Muldoons to come in and try and effectively overrun you, which is now all of a sudden, now they're running into the same problems that you'd have been in: supplies, mouths to feed, governance, overuse of the resources of the immediate area that's in there, which may be why they're, marauding in the first place. But you've just made life really difficult. And then you can add to that too, that's a 3-to-1 in a standard fight. Then if you have defenses that have been put into place, like they're attacking a structure or something, now the numbers go through the roof, and it's extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
So
it's the one time
go ahead,
when the defender is an advantage. Normally our mindset is as armed citizens is that our gunfight will start with us bleeding and dizzy. We've been attacked first. And so you're not really, and we're good people, so we don't presume that bad people are about to hurt us and shoot them first. But if you're dug in a spot, again, the enemy does get to pick when they attack. However, this is an advantage of being a defender that I haven't heard of or thought of before. So that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at medieval Europe as probably as a good example, or even some of the Roman castles, when they would lay siege to castles, sieges would last 1 to 5 years. I mean, the siege of Troy, what was that, 10 years that they laid siege to that city, the best they count. Well, the idea is you only, replacing men, or fighters, men, women, who are whatever you've got, replacing them is very difficult. You can't just, all of a sudden breed and you've got somebody else who can fight. It's a tremendous resource drain to try and train somebody and get them up to where they're at. So you want to preserve life as much as possible on your side. And so it's like sieging a castle. I can think of no other way of, like, that's more suicidal than charging the front gate that's, they're getting ready to pour boiling oil on you and dropping rocks and shooting arrows at you. Now we have guns, so it's even more lethal in that place. And so, yeah, the defender, and that's actually is a section that we're getting ready to add onto Plan to Survive, is home fortification, and what that means: physical fortification, as well as cyber fortification, as well as vehicular fortification, and what we can do to help keep ourselves and our families safe.
So I wanted to ask you about this. So, you're talking about having this community and having, the stockpile. But if you're in a situation like I was during the 4th, where we traveled out of state, to go visit some friends, and all your stuff's, your main stuff's 600 miles away, what kind of mindset do you need to be for something like that?
So that's a great question. And so I was in my gun safe the other day, and I had a buddy that I was showing him Brian's AK, and he looked in there, and I've got like 10 Glocks in there or something. He's like, "Why do you have so many Glock pistols?" He's like, "You can only shoot one of those at a time." And I was like, "You're right. But if something goes bad, I've got 10 neighbors that probably don't have anything that I can arm." So now all of a sudden, I've got a 10 times force multiplier on my side because I spent the time to have a couple of extra pistols so that we could defend our community and our families that were on there. So bringing that full circle to what you were asking, Marty, is when I prepare, first and foremost, you prepare for you and your family, but then you also, what we tell folks is, you need to start preparing for your community too. Because when the kids come to your door and knock on it and they haven't eaten, and they're the same kids that were playing with your family, I don't know if somebody's got the hardcore enough, and it's easy to say, yeah, I'd turn those kids away. Well, it's like, well, would you? And is that really the type of person that you want to be, one? And is that really the type of person that you want to associate with, two? And that's where it's like, you can't feed everybody in your neighborhood. I mean, I get that. But once you've prepared for you and your family, then it's like, okay, what's next? Okay, well, Bob's over here, so I could probably need to add a little bit more over there, because Bob's a ham radio guy, and he has a ham radio, and I don't have a ham radio, so that could become very important in the future. And so now it's a skill inventories of where you go through and you're helping each other out.
Yeah, so something you want to build prior to is your community. You want to start putting people on a list for your community prior to the need to build one hindsight.
And a big part of this is where you are geographically and culturally. Like when I tried to do this in California, it started to get very sketchy from I'll call it our own safety, just because I was worried about getting the cops called on me and
getting red flagged
because I was the crazy prepper. Yeah. To contrast that, when I got to Idaho, we had 20,000 rounds delivered to my house or something, and it was for work, but like I wouldn't be ashamed of owning that much ammo at my house. And the next door neighbor lady, who's this middle-aged overweight soccer mom, was visiting my wife when the ammo showed up in the middle of the day. And my wife was all ready to backpedal and say, "Oh, it's for work and everything." And the lady looked right at her and said, "What's all that?" And my wife said, "Ammo for my husband's work." And she's like, "Boy, we only have like one box of ammo in our house. We should really get something more like this."
Nice.
And so when you're in the right community, you can have open discussions with people about, "Hey, I really want to take care of you, if things get hard, but I'm not going to have enough food to feed the whole community. You might want to think about getting 50 pounds of rice and beans, and then I can help you out a little bit, and we can all eat. Having those conversations with like-minded, liberty-focused people is a really much easier conversation. I'm sure, Jeff, in Utah, with Mormonism, and Mormons, oh man, we have great Mormon friends here, and we're not Mormon, and they don't care. And they all have a religious dictate to keep a year of food. And so being in heavier Mormon areas, you drop right in. It's a prepper culture already. So just a little word, if you're in California and you're getting weird looks from your neighbors, probably, it took me a couple of years to plan my exit from California. There's a great book by Joel Skousen on strategic relocation. And so there's a whole map of the country, and there's a lot of good places and a whole bunch of bad places. And a lot of the good places are cheap to live. So it might take you a couple of years to get to liberty, but it's worth walking the path.
The world kind of changed here about 6 months ago, though.
Oh, you're right. I'm totally wrong. Everything I just said. Everybody's a prepper now. Yeah.
9 months ago, it was like, hey, are you one of them crazy people with tinfoil hat? And it's like, no, I don't believe in government conspiracies or any of that. I'm looking at the probabilities of threat. I just want to be prepared in case something bad happens with food, finances, and whatnot. And it was like, okay, well, you're kind of okay. Well, then COVID hit, and everybody was like, holy cow, this really can happen. And like, I just saw this month's the front cover of The Economist has got a family on there. They're wearing gas masks, but it was like how you can help prepare your family in case of calamity. And so it was like all of a sudden we became the cool kids in school, It was like.
But how many times, in the past 20 years, has something big hit, whether it's a natural disaster, the swine flu, whatever
right.
it may be. This one is actually the government took action in the world actually in measures that we've never seen before.
Yeah,
but it's all signs have been there, and people should have been prepping prior to this because there's been proof in the pudding prior to the COVID. It's just COVID is the biggest one that's hit so far. So
when we wrote Black Autumn, we went off the premise of a black swan event. We don't think it's going to be like, space aliens are going to come down and it's going to be War of the Worlds. We don't think like the Russians are going to.
I got a theory on that. When you finish, go ahead.
we're like, no, it'll be a black swan event. There'll be a series of events that tie together in a weird way that drag society down. And so, and if you look throughout history, that's very much a consistent theme. Like the fall of the Bronze Age, best guess is it was a black swan event that took place. There were a couple of droughts that took over, a couple of wars that took over. And then all of a sudden you had mass migration of people looking for resources, then mass warfare, and the Bronze Age fell apart. You could say the same thing about the Civil War was somewhat of a black swan event where things were tying together in weird ways. The Great Depression was a black swan event. World War I was a black swan event. You could argue in some ways World War II was a black swan event. You'd have to stretch that a little bit. But even the financial collapse of 2008 was a black swan event. And so that's where you're absolutely right, Marty, where it's like, every year massive hurricanes hit the East Coast. Tornadoes hit every single year. Wildfires in California every single year. And it's like, if you guys aren't preparing for that and you're relying on the government to come in and save you, man, you're living in a pipe dream, because it's just, if it gets bad enough, like what we've seen, it gets bad enough, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It just has to be handled badly. And
it typically is. It's handled badly by the government.
And it typically is. The government isn't good at anything other than spending taxpayer dollars. Absolutely. Outside of that, they pretty much suck. And so that's where
Katrina was a great example of that too.
Katrina is a great example. I mean, even COVID is a great example. Look at the way that some of these, governors and mayors have handled this newfound power that they had. And overwhelmingly, it's like, man, there's some that, rose up to the occasion and did a good job, but there's a whole bunch that just did a horrible job for their citizens. And so there's a bunch of people that are upset about that and probably won't get elected next time around. But all of a sudden, it's like, how many times has something bad got to happen before people wake up and go, man, you know what? Maybe I should buy that 50-pound bag of rice and some flour and some cooking
And
oil.
a gun and some ammo.
Get a gun and get some ammo.
Gun sales through the roof right
training.
now. Like you said, California at one point, red flag. I'm going to call cops because you got a gun. But how many of them have gone out and tried to buy guns during this time?
Yeah. Historic highs.
One important thing that Jeff is describing, but I want to really bang every last nail into the coffin on, is that oftentimes really calamitous things, it's not one thing that does you in.
Mm-mm.
It's that we get a stressor like COVID, and then we get civil unrest. And then my personal concern is that this is the perfect time for a cyber attack from somebody that doesn't like us.
Mm-hmm.
So just like the 4 firearm safety rules, most of the time you can get away breaking one, not all the time.
Yeah.
But most of the time you can get by breaking one. But when you break two, usually somebody gets shot.
Absolutely.
And it's that thing of 2 black swans coming in the wrong way. And
or
you just
3.
can't.
Here in Tennessee, we had a slew of tornadoes hit us before COVID. Tennessee, this middle Tennessee here, we got just decimated with tornadoes, and we were in the midst of trying to recover from that, and then the COVID hit, and just shut everything down, and all those families and businesses that were shut down because of the tornadoes couldn't do anything because of the COVID, and then we get hit with the civil unrest that's going on now, on top of that. And then, now you got the election season coming up, and, everybody's kind of tying it with the election season. But, it's usually not one thing, it's a string of things. And if 2 things, 3 things happen, then, you're looking at total collapse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And at the risk of being introducing a discontinuity here, we've had quietly and patiently waiting my super engineer, Austin Mayo, who's also a great shooter and prepper and fan of Jeff's, and he's got a question here.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and we'll start off with Austin, and let's get into our listener questions. And Austin, you'd be a great one to kick it off with, buddy.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys. Jeff, I was wondering, with this time and everything going on, and with this community building, what are you looking at for bringing people in? Are you taking them to the range first? Are you just talking food and supplies with them? With building your community, what are you trying to do to get them in and get that conversation started?
The best way to bring people in is the old-fashioned barbecue, at least in my experience. And then you ease in. We tell folks, we're like, don't even talk about guns because you may freak some people out. Let them bring it up. Inevitably it will come up. You don't have to really worry about that. And but you start with that old-fashioned barbecue where it's like, get hold of your neighbors, and it's like, hey, we're having a barbecue, and you guys are invited. Come over and have some burgers, and let's get to know each other. And it starts there. When you're putting stuff like this together, the first thing that you do is you build on common ground between people. Then that establishes that you can build those relationships of trust, and then all of a sudden you've got a relationship that you can move forward and start doing activities with. And I would tell you too, it's a much more pleasant way to live life. We as human beings, we have to have community, and we find that in different ways. The internet has somewhat replaced that, but in some ways, but to detrimental, I think. But now all of a sudden it's like human to human contact is so vitally important. That's why we got to the top of the food chain. And it all starts, barbecues and beers, and then getting around and then just talking about like, hey, if something happened, or, do you guys, what would you guys need if something happened like this? Is there any way that we could help you? And then part B to my answer is I approach it with a service-minded attitude where if you're telling people, hey, we'd be more than happy to help you guys out if something happens, then, and let me know what you can do, because we've got tools and I've got skills and I know how to fix stuff. And all of a sudden you're just building those relationships of trust that in a bad situation are essential.
That's a good answer.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate it.
But you don't do it under the guise of I'm trying to build my community. You just trying to get to know your neighbors and see who's a fit, who's not a fit, right?
Right.
I mean, you're not dropping that.
Yep.
I'm building my community thing.
See who's a fit, and you want to do that first to begin with, anyways. You know, if I'm like King Cheese Prepper, but I mean, forgive my French, but if I'm an asshole, then nobody's going to want to link up with me. That's not a good mix for a small community that's in there. And so you've got to get that chemistry between folks that are in there, or find the person that can then get in and say, I can handle Jeff. I know he's a grouch, but I'll take care of him. It's like, okay, then we've built that community where we're mitigating some of the issues that could come up that was on there. But yeah, it all starts with just simple, saying hello to your neighbors. It's interesting. I have a bike trail in behind my house, and it used to be, 9 months ago when I'd go running down the bike trail, nobody would even look at me, and it's like, I'm kind of a big, scary looking dude, I guess. And people would kind of look the other way, and
bald hair and the goatee,
bald head and goatee. But it's funny now. It's not like that. I mean, they're looking and they're like, hey, and I make it a point. I say hello to every single person, and I'm an introvert. I'm not a very go out and meet people kind of person, but I make it a point. I say hello, good morning to every single person that I pass on that bike trail, because it's building community, and man, it's just a heck of a lot better way of living life.
I'm watching mental health really degrade in my community. Folks, especially older folks that are stuck inside, are going nonlinear at a much lower level of aggravation. Like, we had one of my neighbors here, his dog bit my dog at the shop, and it turned into this enormous thing because the guy hadn't been able to talk to anybody in a month.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing there, Jeff, I think really has a mental health impact for every single person you say hi to. And I think that holds for every one of us that does it too. So it's a real service, I think, to folks that aren't getting much human contact, who are living alone.
Yeah, it's a great point. We did a show a couple episodes back. We had Walk the Talk America, and we had Sheepdog Impact Assistance on, and they were with things that are going on now. I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about, how it's affecting people's their psyche and just overall mental health. So that's a great point on how that could help overcome that too.
I think as human beings, right? So we've got endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, cortisol that, are kind of the main hormones that flow through our body. They keep us balanced. And if those get out of sync, I like to say, like, the three pillars of preparedness is psychological, emotional, and psychological, emotional, and physical. And then they've got pillars underneath them as well. So on the physical side, the foundation to any preparedness plan is physicality. So you've got to have some physical fitness, but then that also ties in with sanitation and nutrition as well. You can't be like some gym rat that's stinky, nasty, fungal growing and expect to be healthy. And then you've got the psychological side, the endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, whatnot that I talked about, and the balance that's in there. And in psychology, they call it the trifecta of happiness. That is dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin all together. And the number one way that you can achieve those three hormones coursing through your body is through service to somebody else. So we're ingrained, it's in our DNA to have community. And then the emotional side is vitally important. Brian, that guy hadn't talked to anybody. If you think about it, in the past, we kind of figured all this out from writing Black Autumn. In the past, there was no therapist or psychologist or anything. You had a priest, pastor, confessor, and you would go and confess your sins so that you could lift the weight of the world off of your shoulders. Well, that's a very true thing when you go in and you can vent with your buddy or your wife or, whoever that is. Even writing, I found this on the first book that I wrote. Writing was unbelievably cathartic for me to decompress after coming back off of assaults in Afghanistan. And so with that, keeping diaries, I mean, you see this overcurring theme that we've seen throughout the history of man. And so I think with people being cooped up in COVID and now people that are walking around with masks. So now all of a sudden we're losing a level of interpersonality that comes in, as well as 70% of communication, up to 70% of communication is nonverbal. So now we're losing some of the facial expressions that we'd normally have that we can tell off of people. But I am seeing a change, at least in my little community, where people are, it's almost like they're opening up because they've been cooped up. You know, if you're lucky enough that you've got kids or you've got family with you, I've actually, at least in my community, I can't speak for the whole country, but it's like people are closer to their families now. I've spent more time with my kids in the last 6 months than I have in the last, forever, because we're all working from the house, and we're seeing them. And it's led to some great experiences with my family that otherwise we may have missed.
All right. So that was a great question by Austin there. And we're going to go to Instagram now. We're going to take some of the questions here. And I saw this one. I thought this was a good question for you, Jeff. This is from Thomas Childers 1. It says, what survival tool would Jeff say is critical, but maybe the rest of us don't even know its importance very well? Maybe somewhat of a surprise. And Brian, I want you to answer that too.
I think that the number one survival tool, and this is going to kind of sound cliche a little bit, is what you've got between your ears. Knowledge. Continue. I influence people. It's like thirst for knowledge, thirst for skills. Get a new hobby, learn a new skill, get your butt off my hashtag is get your butt off the couch and learn something new. And if you think you've already learned something new, how many people have you taught that to that's in your community to build your community? So I think the number one thing that probably isn't obvious, I mean, it's not a cool piece of gear or an AK or anything like that, right, is just what's between your ears.
I'll agree with that. But if you were going to go with a piece of kit, what would you say?
If I was going to go with a piece of kit, probably, and this will probably throw you for a loop, it'd be a good pair of shoes.
That's a good one.
There's using your head right there. Yeah.
Your biggest limiting factor, if you've got to move and you've got to work, guess what? If your dogs are torn up and blistered and sore, you ain't going to make it.
You're finished.
You're done.
Yeah. What about you, Brian?
So I had to think quick and come up with something more high-minded than a piece of gear there with Jeff's answer there. I would say faith. And I grew up very much without God and became convinced of the necessity of God over time, letting alone whether God exists. This is not a question of God's existence. This is the necessity of God with monkey brains like ours. And for those that are secular, I would very much recommend 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. That is such a big deal for approaching Judeo-Christianity and the hero's journey, and this idea that, we all have a cross to bear, and some are bigger than others. But here's the prototypical or archetypical superhuman Jesus to show you how to shoulder that burden with, pardon me.
That's Jesus calling now.
Yeah, it is. Well, that might have been Buddha saying, "Hey, MFer." But
what about me?
Again, regardless of the divinity of Christ, here's Superman to show you how to shoulder this burden that we all have with honor and grace. And so, I would encourage folks. I hope I'm not hammering it too hard, but you atheists out there, I'm not trying to save you, but I think that hero's journey is a big deal. And for kit, I would say the life straw.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, that thing. That's if things really go bad. I think most people need two weeks of food in their pantry and 2 weeks of water. But the thing that you wouldn't ordinarily think of, that life straw is a really cool product.
Yeah. And then I would add to that, and this isn't out of the ordinary. I mean, this is your basic stuff, but you need a good med supply, bandages, antiseptic, that kind of stuff. Because again, if your dogs ain't working, you got to get them back healthy.
You got to make sure you have those antis. So we put that as part of our, part of your little kit that you put together. Your antidiarrheals, your anti-inflammatories, your antiseptics. your antibiotics, and it wasn't that long ago in, the Civil War, more men died from dysentery than died from bullets. And so dysentery used to wipe people out. And all of a sudden, if we're talking a really bad situation, that would happen again.
Yeah, I'm going to change my answer to what Jeff said there. Antidiarrheals are so inexpensive and can save so many lives that that's one of the ones that I hoard, or don't hoard, but I keep way more of it than my family could ever use, because you can get it at Walmart and it's just as good. You get it on bulk, and then you could save a whole bunch of kids if the water supply gets corrupted. In certain areas, cholera can be a real thing. That's more like Florida than up here, but it is a thing.
Yeah. All right, next question. This comes from Dickie the Third. Says, Mr. Kirkham, how do you set up your armor, belt, rig, etc. to best run the AK?
A lot of that depends. That's a great question, and a lot of it, I had my setup. Well, let me answer it this way. That's a great question, and obviously it's situationally dependent, right? What you're. But I will say this: when the war kicked off, we looked like we carried tons of kit on us, and as the war progressed, we got lighter and thinner and lighter and thinner and lighter and thinner until, everything that I had that was available to me was for pure assault purposes, and then I had a very small backpack that the rest of the stuff would go into, and if it wouldn't fit in that backpack, then it wasn't coming with me. We didn't carry food. We'd carry little gel packs maybe, because you can live without food. Water was another thing, but you could live without food. And so setting up the kit, I streamlined mine down to where it was just a flat chest rack with mags, and then I had grenades and stuff like that were on the side. But so the overall premise would be stay as streamlined as possible, because you never know what activities you're going to have to do. You're going to have to work at some point, or you may have to run, or you may have to climb over a fence, or just walking around in itself. And so stay streamlined. And what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for somebody else based off of body type and size and strength and all of that other stuff. But I would say is, like, if you're going to run a system and you figure out what that is, and I have yet to find the perfect one. Everybody ends up with kind of a hybrid of this, that, and the other that works for them, and based off of their budget as well as what they've got available and what they like. Right. Then once you do that, take it out and test it, run it. I mean, practice and train with it.
And to add to that, tandem dually, what is the best method for carrying your mags? Bullet rear with beer can grip, or is there a better method? Also, what are the go-to mag holders? Your go-to mag.
That's a great question. So, like, if there's a way of reloading the AK and grabbing that magazine, I tested it and over the course of years, and the best that I found that worked for me was that beer can grip. I did a modified index. Traditional indexing, you use your index finger and you point it into the magazine. Well, you can do that with an AK magazine, but it's a little bit more difficult. So I was doing a hybrid of bullets. I'm right-handed, so bullets would face towards my right instead of my left. And then I would index, but I'd use my thumb as the pointer finger for just one more thing.
That's what I use.
And just beer can that thing in. And so, but yeah, I think that's what he means when you say the beer can grip, with your thumb running up the spine to put it in. I found that worked the best for me, especially when you start talking about you're going to do tactical mag reloads and stuff like that.
Very good. And we know what Brian's favorite mag holders are. Airsoft.
Yeah, that's right. I'm baller on a budget, man. Yes, Sonny Pazikas has an interesting take on that when he's teaching beginners. I'd be interested in your thoughts on it, Jeff, not to cause controversy, but what he teaches is to grab the beer can and then hit the floor plate against your hip so that your grip slides down to the bottom of the mag with your pinky on the floor plate. And what that does is it sets the distance, your hand is in precisely the same distance from the top of the magazine every time. Now, it's extra steps. So I'm not saying it's a high speed low drag kind of technique. But for beginners, does that seem reasonable to you, or do you just grab it wherever and go for it?
Sonny has trained a whole bunch of people. I'm not familiar with that technique, but he's trained a ton of people. And so if that's working for him and he's having success, I mean, that's the thing is being an instructor. You have to teach what works with your students, because if it's not working with your students, they think you're a crap instructor. And so, and that's where I go. It probably is a decent technique for training people like that. That's not the way that I do it, but tomato, just because the way Jeff does it this way doesn't mean it's the best way in the world. I have my reasons based off of my testing, but I'm sure that's probably is a good technique.
All right, let's go to, I'm not asking that one. I'll ask this one last, just because it's stupid. Are there any good iron sight upgrades for the AK?
Yes.
Mustang Perry.
Yes, there are. If you buy an Occam rail system, all of those flip down iron sights that are available, that are, there's tons of great stuff that are out there, and Brian's rifle makes it possible so you can use them all on an AK. It is a tremendous advantage.
And Brian, you've got a new set out. Talk about those.
Yeah, we were having a hard time getting sights that were exactly how we wanted them, so we built our own. I think Jeff has a set on his second pistol. He's running CZs on his first. And they're very similar, just our take on it, made in America, and we could get them. 4 apertures in the rear. It's more like an AR style sight as opposed to a notch and post. It's a ghost ring. And it goes from a big wide ghost ring, close in stuff, to a really tiny one that's great for accuracy. For those folks that do not have my rail, excess sights, X-ray Sierra sights, makes a front sight post with a tritium vial in it, so that you can at least get, if it's dark out, you've got something there. And of course, you should have a light on your gun so that you can correctly identify a target. So not enough to have a lighted front post. You need to know what you're shooting at, but I really like that one.
Very good. All right, so Pierce really wants me to ask this question. Pierce Taylor, he IG'd it, he Facebooked it, he even emailed it to me. So he really apparently wants me to ask this. So it's 3 parts. What is the effective range of an AK? What is the optimal magnification to maximize the capabilities of the AK? Is taxation theft?
My man.
I knew you'd like that one, Brian.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'll answer the first one based off of historical history. So when the AK was developed, the Russians did a study, and they figured out that the majority of infantry engagements were happening within 300 meters. And this was coming from hardcore guys that thought a battle rifle that wasn't accurate out to 1,000 meters was garbage. And then they did a study, and it was like, yeah, that's great, but the vast majority of the engagements are happening at 300 meters and in. And the vast majority of those engagements were happening within 100 meters of each other. So it kind of changed the way that guys, militaries started looking at rifles. So what's the optimum range for the AK, for accuracy? Well, the way that the Soviets put that rifle together, and this goes back towards the ergonomics, on the average sized man standing in an average shooter stance, when he puts that rifle onto his shoulder, and if he happens to be looking over the sights, not at his sights, then the rifle will impact the ground at 100 meters. So if he squeezes the trigger, so we're talking a moderately trained individual that's shooting under stress. Under stress, we tend to look over our sights and not through the sights. And that average shooter, on average, the bullet, when he squeezes the trigger, the bullet will impact at 100 meters. There's genius in that, because now he is hit from 0 all the way out to 100 meters effectively, as long as his windage is good left and right. He's hitting effectively out to 100 meters. That's why the Soviets, when you're zeroing at 100 meters, the AK is designed to be zeroed at 100 meters. You aim at the belt line. Well, the impact of the round is 23 centimeters above the point of aim, because it's still on the rise and then it starts dropping off. But if you consistently aim at the belt line, what they teach in their doctrine, see, they don't teach to stack bullets. They teach just aim at the guy's belt line and you'll hit them. They just want to put lead in bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you aim at that belt line, you've 0 to 100 meters, you're good to 350 meters for engagements. So now what they did was they took that, 300 meters and in, they engineered the rifle so that under stress, it's impacting at 100 meters. And they came up with a design for training people, just aim here and you're going to be pretty good most of the time. Genius.
Truly.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Brian?
No, when my client, I have video of us hitting, and we were doing it yesterday just for fun, steel out of 500 meters. We were using the ACSS and, getting work done with it out of 5. But I tell people at 0 to 300, and if you have to shoot anybody over 200, I really hope you've got a belt fed and a bolt gun because the zombies are marching and it's on. And so, the vast majority of us, if we ever have to use our rifles in defense, it's my suspicion that it's going to be 50 yards and in. Mm-hmm. And so what I also tell people is that I don't care where they zero. I care that they know what their dope is. And so to shoot at 20, 5, 25, 50, 100, 200, 300, mm-hmm. because every gun is different. You can't rely on BDC. We learned this with our rifles. With Defiant Munitions, they were designing their load for our guns. And Pete was like, hey, why is your velocity coming out of your guns 50 feet per second faster than everybody else, at least? And I said I didn't know, and then I thought carefully about it, and we spend a lot of time getting our headspace just right, and it's very tight. It's legal, it's still the spec, but we push it as close as we can so that you get the maximum life out of your gun. And the unintended consequence of that is that the seating of the neck of the casing is much tighter. It's a much tighter seal. And so you get more velocity because you're keeping more of the powder burning behind the bullet and not leaking out of the receiver. The consequence of that extra 50 feet per second gets very real out at farther ranges. Mm-hmm. And so your gun is different. Your gun does not have the same exact headspace as the one that came off the line before and after it. So that whole idea of the zero story of what Travis Haley teaches with walking his students back, every single target's different. And so you just really got to know where your bullets are going.
Very good. And on the head spacing question, Ed Burton says, how often should head spacing be checked and what tools do you suggest?
Jeff, do you have input on that one or do you want me to take that one?
You take that one. That's your wheelhouse.
All right. There's a lot of discussion about headspace and that if a gun closes on a no-go gauge, it's a bomb. That's simply not true. If that were true, headspace gauges would stop there, but they don't. When you close on a no-go gauge, you're only halfway through the life of the gun. A field gauge is the bomb detector. And so they're not cheap. They're $40 or $50, but if you have a gun that you're a little suspicious of, getting a no-go and a field gauge. I mean, also, I have come across guns through our shop that we didn't make that won't close on a go gauge. And that's super dangerous because if you get a bullet or a round rather, that wasn't made quite right, the gun might not go completely into battery when you fire. And so you're using a very small surface area of the bolt. The bolt isn't completely locked up and you can get bad things happening. So for most well-made guns, a field gauge should really be all you need. But if you want to chart the age of the gun, a no-go also helps.
Why didn't y'all tell me my camera wasn't on? I just now noticed my camera wasn't on.
And
I've been sitting here doing hand gestures and making faces.
And I got to, because of all the misinformation out there, I got together with a couple other people in the AK industry and we wrote a paper on how head spacing should properly be measured. And it's at vsomedia.org. And it was John Holton, Kurt Alstrom from VSO, and Robert Forbes, who's kind of a sage of the AK industry and makes a lot of the tooling for pro builders and home builders alike.
Very good. All right, a couple more questions, and then we got a giveaway to do.
Heck yeah.
Navy Vet Patriot asked, are U.S. AKs less desirable than ones from other countries? I have an AK build kit, and someone told me it's a U.S. kit, so it's not worth even building. So I don't think, because he won that kit from us, and it's a Polish build kit. I thought it came from Pioneer Arms.
Yeah, that's right. Those are made in Poland.
Yeah.
Yep. We are we are extremely choosy about what parts we build on. I will say that the quality is mixed on what's available right now. Some of it is jewelry, and some of it is hot garbage, and the stuff that's being made today in Europe, some of it is fantastic, and some of it is garbage. And what I can say is that we build on WBP kits. And with few except the critical parts, the bolt carrier, and the trunnion, those are that's the holy trinity. Like, those are the parts that will really give you a bad day if they're not working right. Those three parts by WBP are amazing. And so if somebody has a kit that they're suspicious of, they can literally buy those three components from Arms of America. And as long as it's a European spec AK that is not half a Norinco parts kit or something, they're going to be just fine. And even if it is a Norinco, like, a lot of those parts are interchangeable, not all of them.
So he's the guy that we got to help get him built, Brian.
Roger that.
We kind of put him on the back burner there, so we got to get back on. All right, where'd it go? There's one more good one here, and then we're going to do the giveaway. And I didn't read everybody's question, but you're still all eligible. So everybody who submitted a question is eligible to win our giveaway, and Brian's going to tell you about what we're giving away here. Where'd it go? We did Ed Burton. He had a couple of questions. So Chris Zuck, what are the pros and cons of running an AK bolt over versus under on a reload? And I know we've talked about this on the show last time. Jeff was on here, and we had two different they were both great answers and reasoning on why they do it. But go, guys. What's your preference?
So what's the question now?
On charging bolt, over or under reload.
Oh. Gotcha. For me, the world according to Jeff, right? And we'd all be happy if we listen to me, but I roll the rifle over. So and we spoke about this before, about the second fastest motion your body can make is turning your wrist. It's very fast. It's very sure. You see fencers and swordsmen would do that from time to time. So anyways, when I reload, I reload as if I did my stuff based off of, combat stuff. So is this the fastest way? I mean, I can reload plenty fast, but it's not, there's probably somebody else out there with something that's a little bit faster, but bear with me here a second, because I'll elevate, rotate, strip the mag, dump the mag, load in the new mag, roll the rifle over, and hit the charging handle. The reason that we do it that way, or at least the reason that we did it that way, was because we want 100%. So
rolling it over where the charging handle's up top.
Rolling it over so the charging handle's up top, because we were putting lights and lasers and stuff like that on our AKs, and there was a chance that you could grab like a knob off of an aim point or something like that. I've seen that happen. As well as you could just flat out miss it in the dark under stress. Seen that happen before. Going underneath, your hand has to travel a much greater distance than if you just roll it. It actually, after you've loaded the magazine and then you roll the rifle, your hand is right there next to the charging handle, and you can bring that thing back on. So I just found it's a much sure way. And then with the added advantages, I can do it standing, I can do it squatting, I can do it kneeling, and I can do it in the prone, all that same way. And so I'm a big believer in do one thing for as many things as possible, the same technique over and over again. I reload my pistol, my rifle, and my shotgun all the same way. They're all very, very, very similar on how I do that. And then the nuances, obviously, with the AK is the charging. And so that's, for me, I roll it over. And I'm not a big fan of charging handles on the left-hand side. Because again, in a combat rifle, if you're on the range, hey, that's great, and you're going against the buzzer or stuff. But I saw a guy, fell on the ground. We were fast roping. He was left-handed, so the charging handle was towards his body, and he didn't get a good purchase on the fast rope. He fell about 50 feet, shoved that charging handle into his rib. Rib went through his lung, and all of a sudden, like, we had a medevac. I saw another guy lose his front teeth. We were doing immediate action drills, and he jumped down, got too choked up on his rifle. He was a left-handed shooter, and that thing came back and smacked him in the teeth, knocked his front teeth out. So it was one of those things where it's like, the guys who put this thing together and designed it, they probably had thought of all that, and so I always left the charging handle on the right side and didn't mess with it.
Brian, you got a philosophy on that?
I go underneath, but only because I've been doing it for so many years. But the first time I saw Jeff and his rap, I was like, oh shit, he's right. So no, I think what Jeff just said is absolutely perfect, and I also agree. There's more than one way to skin the cat. Yeah. But charging a rifle when you're in prone and you're actually trying to get cover and keep your head down, especially when you're a big dude like me, going underneath is not cool. And so I think that what Jeff says there is quite wise.
Yeah, very good. And you can go back to our episode. Season 1, episode 11, 299, and then Vincent gives a good argument on under, why to do it under. But
and I think, sorry to cut in on you, but I think if you scroll far enough back in our Instagram or on YouTube, I have Jeff do his reloading rap, and so there's a visual, either a visual display of what Jeff's talking about, either on our YouTube channel or Instagram or both. I forget exactly.
Well, Jeff's got one. I know. I've seen it. You've got a video out on your YouTube, right, Jeff?
We do, yeah. If you go to Full 30, our Full 30 channel, YouTube bumped us, so we're no longer on YouTube. Okay. We have fallen victim to the censorship suppression of the man, and so I guess they didn't dig what we were saying. So they.
I'm done with YouTube, man. I'm finished with them. Only reason I still post the show on there is there's some of our listeners that don't have the podcasting stuff. So. Yeah.
I mean, so all of our stuff's on Full 30, and you can see the reloading drill there too. And I shared the Occam defense when Brian filmed that. I shared that over on the Ready Man side too. Cool. I mean, you'll have to scroll for days to get down there on the IG, but it's on there too.
Very good. I guess that's all our questions we've got. Unless you guys want to field one on pistol braces.
Oh.
Which pistol brace do you like the best for AK? Triangle folder or standard 1913 braces? This is from Matthew Lottie.
What's the metal one you put on mine, Brian?
That's a SIG, and I mostly like it, but we're actually making our own. I think does yours kind of wingding? Does it kind of rotate if you're not careful?
Yes, but that's okay because the standard way that you put it on, the knob was getting in the way, so you can flip it around and you can fold either to the left or to the right and move the knob so it's not hitting you in the face. So I really like that SIG arm brace.
So we're SIG has been kind enough to sell us parts, and we're making our own now. That's gonna have sling attachment points running down the length of it, so you can put the sling wherever on the brace that you want it, and it'll fold. And then it's going to take a tail hook mod 1 as the brace, which is this funny, it looks kind of like a barrette almost, this funny, or like a fish cross section, a fish steak. And that clamps onto a buffer tube. And so we're just putting a boss that is the buffer tube to clamp that thing onto. I think JMac Customs has also released something very similar to that. And so there's solutions out there now that, well, I'll be sending you one of you'll probably get serial number 1 of that new brace for eval there. And so those two are cool. I would say anything with a metal strut, which is I think what your point was you don't want the thing flexing around.
Yeah, the triangle one tends to flex a little bit, and it shoots. I mean, it shoots great, but it's one of those where it's like, man, I don't know if I like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think if they changed that to a metal strut, they'd sell the snot out of them.
Yeah, it'd be bomber.
Yep.
And the one that you have, Brian, you've got a new brace out, the triangle, the honeycomb, that's what I call it, but you call it something else.
That's the hex.
The hex. That's what it is, the hex.
Yep, that's going to be out in a folding version pretty soon here. It's a fixed version at the moment, so it's perfect for folks that have a 1913 rear trunnion and just want a really nice, functional. You know, one of the big deals with the wood stock is that you could beat somebody to death with it pretty effectively, or like the way the Afghans and Pakistanis do. They use that thing as a good way to. They use it kind of like a ladder, where one guy will hold on to the stock and the other guy will hold on to the front sight, which terrifies me because the guns are loaded when they're doing this. But they'll use it as a big hook kind of. And that's one of my desires with our guns is that we maintain the ruggedness of still being able to beat somebody to death with the thing if you had to. And the hex is super burly. It's very lightweight, even though it's aluminum. Skeletonized and has 6 different anti-rotation QD points for proper, for setting your sling up just how you want it. Mm-hmm. A big frustration of mine when I'm switching hands with slings that attach at the receiver line or in front of that is that when you go to swap hands, you often will grab the sling along with the grip. Mm-hmm. By positioning the sling attachment point 2 or 3 inches back from the receiver, it hangs vertical and gives you a fair margin for grabbing without catching the sling too. So if you're an ambidextrous nerd like me, you'll really like what we did with the sling there. And then another cool aspect is that there's a lot of bungee area for putting a Rats right there. And so we're giving away one of those this week, aren't we, Marty?
That's right. We're going to give away one of those, and we're going to give away a set of your sights.
Yeah, and those are going to work great on an AK. They work on a SCAR, although you've still got that front sight, and they also work really well on lever guns with the excess pick rail on the top. Mm-hmm. So we're finding more and more funny applications. I bet they would work great on a 1022 as well. We're still working out putting something up front to get our front sight on.
They would work great on a Kel-Tec Sub 2000 also.
Oh, mm-hmm. Very cool. Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff you can throw them on. Oh, of course. Yeah.
All right, so let's do this. Let's do a giveaway. And we had our good buddy Austin tally up everybody that asked questions. So read off the name. Let me verify and make sure, because some of these people are the same on Instagram and Facebook. So I'll let you know who's the same.
Sounds good.
And he's assigned numbers to you. And we're going to do our standard, what is that, the Google random number thingy?
I'll get on it. Yep.
Okay. So hit us, Austin.
You want the names or?
Number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this.
Gotcha. So we've got number 1 at Navy Vet Patriot.
Okay.
Number 2 is Tandem Dooley. Number 3, Dickie the Third. 4, Peeman 301. 5, Thomas Childers. 6, Bird Brain Industry. 7, Mustang Perry. 8, Craig Jones 603. And then from Facebook, we've got number 9 at Chris Zuck. Number 10, Edward Burton. 11, Pierce Taylor. 12, Jonathan Gallup. And 13, Matthew Lottie.
Okay, so we got Pierce is on, he's P-Man, so we got to take him out. So we've got to renumber those to where we got 12.
Sounds good.
And Pierce also sent in an email. He was very aggressive this week or this month.
I'm not gonna throw the results, but shout out to Chris Zuck and Dickie the Third. Dickie, I think, owns serial, the third gun we ever shipped, and Chris is right behind him. So
nice.
Thanks for your business, guys.
So what we're going to do is, with those prizes, we're going to have 2 winners. So somebody's going to win the stock, and somebody's going to win the sights. And then, Brian, what I'd also like to do is give away a T-shirt, or you got T-shirts, right? You're in stock on those.
Yep, and if somebody wins a hex stock but doesn't have anything to put it on, we'll swap them out for something cool. The Rats Tourniquet is one of the only products that we don't make that we sell. And so, a family pack of Rats Tourniquets or something like that would be a sub if people want to write in and say, hey, I can't use this thing. That sort of deal.
Okay, very good. Very good. All right, so what we're going to do is, since there are 12 entrants, I want you to randomize 12 times for our first winner.
Get ready for it.
All right, and Austin, count his, like when the first number comes up, just count his 12 times. And then whatever the 12th number is, that's the winner of the butt stock. And then we'll do it again, and that's going to be the winner of the sights.
Cool. All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the lucky number 12 is number 8.
Number 8? Who is it?
Craig Jones 603 on Instagram.
Nice. So, Craig, shoot me an email, talkingled@gmail.com. And, again, to be able to use that, you got to have the 1913 pick rail trunnion back there. If you don't have that
could be, an MCX. You know, there's a bunch of other guns out there that have those.
Right.
But, yeah.
Okay. Or if you just want a cool stock,
It is
and
pretty
you don't
cool.
care, I mean, we'll send you that too.
Well, they are. Yeah, we did try to put some art into them.
All right, let's go for the sights now, and tell us about the sights as we're spinning here.
So they are on on our rail. They give you a a 2.4 inch height over bore, so halfway between an AR and an AK. And like I said, they work on pretty much anything with the pick rail. Little low on an AR-15. They are lower than like a standard Magpul sight. Yeah. And but they have 4 apertures, 4 ghost rings that it's kind of like a riverboat paddle wheel. And so you can flip for what you want. I'd probably keep it on, a medium size ring. And then if you want to reach out and touch someone, you flip to the small one, and all of a sudden you got a lot more aiming precision. And they're 100% made in Idaho. And let's see, what else? Yeah, America.
America.
And mil-spec Type 3 Anno and black oxide on the steel parts.
Okay, so can you do that randomizer taking number 8 out and doing the other ones, or is that too complicated?
I've been spinning here, and Austin will just tell me stop, and that'll be the one.
That'll be good. So you're just spinning randomly.
Let's go right there. Number 6, Bird Brain Industry.
Bird Brain. All right, Bird Brain wins the sights. And he had another off-the-wall question. Or actually, we didn't read his question. That's the one I'm going to read here in a little bit. It's just ridiculous. But and now let's do a shirt.
Cool.
And Jeff's also associated with Black Rifle Coffee. He's one of the co-founders of Black Rifle Coffee. You've got an AK blend, right?
Yes, we do.
I want to give away one of those, so I'll buy one of those from you too, and then I'll just tell you who to ship it to. Would that work?
Yeah, we can certainly put that together.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Let me know when to stop, Austin.
Ready for the next one? Let's go right there. Number 5, Thomas Childers.
Thomas Childers, good deal. He wins a shirt. And you winners, talkingled@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Says AK Corner, Season 2, Episode 10. Winner, tell me what you won. Shirt size, if you won the shirt. And then if you don't want the stock, you can't use the stock, then let me know that. And then Brian's going to give you something alternative for that. So now let's do the coffee. The AK blend. We gave that away last time you were on, Jeff.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and Tia really likes that blend too. I'm not a coffee drinker, but she is, and she loved it.
You're not a coffee drinker?
No, man, I got natural energy.
Oh.
Yeah.
He's into sports.
Must be nice.
Must be nice.
I see these
Coffee has like the opposite effect. I drink it and I just crack. I just like it zonks me out.
Wow.
We got one more then?
Yeah, we're gonna do the coffee now. So do another random. We'll let Jeff count now. We'll let Jeff say when to stop.
Ready? Tell me when you're ready, Brian.
I'm rolling.
1, 2, 3, go.
8. Did we already? Did
We
8?
already did 8.
Okay. One more. 4. Did 4 already win?
Nope.
They're all in a bunch.
P-Man 301.
All right, P-Man, you get some coffee.
It's good coffee too.
talkingled@gmail.com. Email me. Let me know that you won. I don't get in touch with my winners either, so you have to listen to this show. So if I don't hear from you after a while, then I get the prizes. I keep them for myself. No, we give them away. We'll find an alternative winner, but if you're a listener to the show, you know I don't get in touch with you if you win. So you have to listen to the show to win. Gives you an incentive to tune in each and every week.
Oh, can we put my guys in there as alternates? Chris and Dickie the third.
Well, I mean, they'll be on the list, definitely.
There we go. Great.
Absolutely. Has Dickie won something before? We had one of your guys win something last time.
Oh, yeah. No, my guys have a habit of winning.
Well, I mean, our listeners are your guys, so there you go.
There you go.
My guys are your guys and gals.
Yeah, we have a fair number of women buying our rifles. It's awesome. My personal utopia is where every woman is armed and shoots every rapist and shitbag in the face. And that utopia, I think the women can pull it off. We gotta be better to them on the range and not give them 4470s or 44 mags to shoot on their first day.
Just empower them. Gotta empower them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Build that confidence. So great show, guys. Thank you so much. Jeff, talk about new things that you guys got coming up with all the companies, Ready Man, your books, Black Rifle Coffee, the Beard Company. You still doing the Beard Company?
No. I let Matt and Josh take and run with that. So I was like, you guys, man, best of luck. God bless.
Okay, all right.
Take it and run with it. Now probably the big thing that's taking up most of my time right now is Full 30, FULL30.com. We're in the process. We've been we just released the beta version of the phone app. People have been waiting forever for that to get through. The beta version's out. We're forecasting that's gonna the regular version, and it's available on iOS or Android right now. And so we're anticipating just a couple of weeks, make sure that there's no bugs in there. People are getting in there and beating it up right now, fix any of the bugs, and then boom, we'll release that. We're doing a reskin right now. Some of the features that we're going to bring on. The whole idea is to, again, build the community. How do we build the 2A community? Through sharing of lessons and stuff. And us on the business side, what we're doing is, because everybody's gotten kicked off of YouTube, they're getting, it's only a matter of time before they get kicked off of Patreon.
Instagram, Facebook is choking us down. Yeah.
So we're the alternative for that. We own the IP. We built it from the ground up, so nobody's going to shut us down. Amazon's not going to shut us down. YouTube, JW Player, Vimeo, they can't shut us down because it's ours. We own it. And then what we're doing is we're actively looking for ways to help the content creators monetize, so that guys can get on there and, are they going to be able to make a living on there? Maybe some outliers will, but they'd be able to put some extra change in their pocket so that they can keep going as we continue to build the community. And then what we're doing is we're grabbing videos from Full 30 and we're using those. We're cross-referencing some of the lessons learned in Full 30. There's some fantastic information there. We're cross-referencing that over to plantosurvive.com so that when people are going through and looking at their skills, they can go, on the firearms, obviously, then go, hey, here's a video. They can click on it, and it'll take them to Full 30 where they'll watch the videos. We
need an advocate in the social media platform, definitely.
We are tantalizingly, some of the folks that know Full 30, we've had our ups and downs. We're bootstrapping the whole thing. So we're not in debt. It's owned by pro 2A guys. As a matter of fact, very quickly here, Full 30 is going to be owned by 2 former Green Berets and a staunch outdoorsman, and that's it. And so, we'll never give up people's 2A rights or their right to the freedom of speech, that they can get on there and talk about what it is they love, with guns and why it's so important for our country and for our freedom.
Very cool. Very cool. And if you lead heads would like to see Talking Lead on there, shoot Jeff an email, reach out to him and let him know you'd like to hear Talking Lead on there.
Absolutely. So Full 30, so Jeff at Full 30, FULL30, the number 30.com, and blast me an email. If there's guys that are out there and you want to be content creators, we go through by hand and choose the content creators. We haven't opened it up. it's very easy. It's nothing to get on there, but we confirm people who say they are who they say they are before we let them on the platform, because we want to make sure that we avoid any trolls or issues that could pop up. But super easy to get on there. So, and actually Jared Markle, who runs the backside of Student of the Gun,
friend of the show, been on many times.
Yep. And Jared is the CEO now of Full 30, and that guy is amazing. Like Jared Markle, the whole Markle family are just fantastic.
I'm glad you snapped him up. He is a very capable and talented individual. I can't wait to see what he does with it. That's great news.
Lil Fedor.
He's doing some amazing stuff. He really is. Yeah. Paul did a great job when he raised that guy, because, I can't say enough good stuff about Jared. He's just a good human being.
Very cool. You guys go check out Full 30. Ready Man Network. What's the handles on that?
Ready Man is just readyman.com. Plan to Survive is plan number 2 survive.com. Go check out all that. We've got a bunch of endeavors, but our main push right now that we've got going to get out there, because there's just such a need for it, is Full 30. So we're pulling out all the stops and just investing in that thing to get it to where it needs to be, so that we can serve the community.
Very good. Brian, what Occam Defense? You were talking off air. You got some things you can and can't talk about. Let's talk about both those.
We'll save some of the news for next episode, but Austin's out here helping me cut metal on my first design, which Austin helped me with when I think he was still in college. It's called the RST. You mentioned it earlier. Really
I half-assed mentioned it. I apologize.
Yeah, that's all good. No,
I got the R right.
You did get that right. It's a rear sight base for the AK, so it replaces the block that has the sight leaf on it with a fixed sight. So you've always got your backup irons, which I think is incredibly important on a defensive weapon, but you also have a chunk of pick rail. And so if you are an OG wood AK guy, but you want to run a red dot, and Marty's got a beautiful picture one up there on the video for this recording. It works super well. It does exactly what it says it does. And so we're manufacturing that part this week, and we have a foldy version of the Hex that's going to be coming out in the next month or so. And what was the other thing that we were going to announce that we talked about? Oh, yeah, this is big news.
Drum
by
roll.
the time this airs, we will have introduced a new type of muzzle mounting system for the AK. So in other episodes, we've talked about how horrific it is to mount a suppressor on 14-1 left threads, and also on the FAL. Just anything where you're registering off the muzzle face is really hard to get right. You have to be below a 10,000th of an inch in flatness and perpendicularity to the axis that the bullet travels in order to have a good suppressor mount. Well, we got tired of that, and so we came up with a heat fit system where we dunk the barrel in liquid nitrogen and heat up the muzzle device, and they ordinarily wouldn't slide past each other. But when you get them extremely far apart in temperature, all of a sudden those two rings grow and shrink so that you can slide the muzzle device on precisely once. And then when the two reach the same temperature, they're effectively cold welded together. You'll never get them off again. And so what that does is it takes the muzzle face, which is really hard to do right, and changes what's called the datum or the reference point to the outside of the barrel, which is really easy to get right. So every gun comes off perfect. And instead of us having to charge a lot of money and use a lot of time fitting these threaded devices, now we can slap one on in 2 minutes and have it be perfect. And so that's really exciting for us. There's a Vortex flash hider and a brake, and they'll be available as order options very soon. If you've already ordered a rifle, you'll be contacted about whether you'll likely be contacted as to whether you want to change to that or not. But we're really jazzed about them.
Very good. That's some big news. And then, of course, you're holding out for next month. He's going to be dropping some even bigger news for you.
That's right.
Yeah, I can't wait. And then Century Arms, they're doing their best to keep up with the demand. They're cranking them out just as quick as they can get the parts. Same thing, U.S. Palm for the mags and the grips. And ammo, I mean, my God, it's just nearly impossible to get any ammo right now, but they're still importing and making it and bringing it in, and just as soon as they get it in, it's sold. So you just got to be, quick to grab and ready to go on their website and be looking every day. Presenting sponsors of the Talking Lead AK Corner, Century Arms. Check them out. And IWI. Don't forget about IWI US. We're going to get Jeremy back on. It was a great episode that we did with Jeremy with IWI US. Is that the one you missed, Brian?
It is, and I was sad to miss it because I'm a giant fan of the Galil. IWI, they have some very clever people working for them. And, there's a bunch of designs out that are quote-unquote new designs that major gun companies have put out that are straight knockoffs of the Galil. And that's great. I think, Picasso said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, the Israelis are some really clever people, and they make a great firearm. So I really enjoyed listening to that episode, and I wish I'd gotten to ask some questions because I'm a fan.
Yeah, well, of course, they make the Tavor also, where we've been talking about bullpups with Kel-Tec. I want to talk about the Tavor, so we'll get Jeremy on the regular show, and we'll talk about the Tavor. And they've even got an AR that they're making too, the Zion 15, and a pistol.
They got a pistol, called the Masada that I'm pretty interested in checking out too.
Yeah, they've also got the TS12 out now, the Tavor TS12, the shotgun, which I have not shot yet, but I've been hearing some stories about it. So go support those that support the Talking Lead podcast, our sponsors, our friends of the show. Let them know you appreciate everything that they're doing, not only for the show, but for our 2A community. And go show Jeff some love with the Full 30. Guys, go and subscribe. And if you're not already a subscriber to Full 30, which probably most of our listeners are in the know, and they're aware of Full 30, but we get new people every day. We've been running a contest with Kel-Tec and Mission First Tactical, Buck Knives, Fiocchi Ammo, where we're giving away a CP33, which is Kel-Tec's 22 target pistol. It'll hold 33 rounds in their magazine. We're giving that away. We're giving away a custom holster from Mission First Tactical. That's the only one that they've ever made for the CP33. So you'll have a one-of-a-kind holster, and there's a cool graphic that they've put on there with our logo and their logo and the sponsors. Buck Knives, included in that is a 119 special 75th anniversary collector's knife. You can't get it anymore. They don't make them. They don't sell them in the stores. That's cool. Fiocchi Ammo is giving away a box of ammo, like 1,500 rounds of ammo for that CP33. Kel-Tec's putting in one of their CL43 flashlights, and you're going to get a custom Talking Lead Mission First Tactical dump tray that's included with that too. Somewhere around $1,000 total. And just go to our Facebook page. There's a link there. We put links in our Instagram, on Facebook. All the sponsors have put links up too. And it's one of those gleans where you go and like our Facebook and Instagrams and do certain things, you get more entries. And we've got thousands and thousands of entrants right now. It's only going to be running as you listen to this show. The 25th of July is when it ends. So you've got some time. Go enter for a chance to win that. And my whole point in saying that was, we've picked up several thousand new listeners to the show. So it's been really good. And welcome to all our new listeners to the Talking Lead podcast.
And hey, Marty, if I could poke in one last time here and give a plug, Full 30. Jeff takes an enormous number of risks on businesses, and the number of entrepreneurs who are in tech who are also conservative is relatively rare. And so when we find these guys who are willing to sack up and take a big risk in tech and they're on our side, we need to really get behind them and push as hard as we friggin' can, because free speech is seriously under attack right now. And what Jeff's doing is really important. hopefully he makes a good dollar out of it at the end. But what he's doing is really good for our culture. And so I just encourage everybody to, do the chain letter thing of, hey, tag 5 of your friends with full 30, get on as subs and drive this thing, because we can drive from the bottom up while he's driving from the top down and really accelerate his growth.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
I got an idea, so when I get done, I'll tell you. So that does it for another episode of the Talking Lead AK Corner. Tune in each and every month. Season 2, we've only got 2 more episodes left, so they're going to be big ones. We've got some big names lined up. Can't tell you who it is just yet, but Brian knows who we got lined up coming up next. And go and like I said, show all our sponsors and everybody some love. Jeff, thank you again for being our guest. This is her 3rd appearance on the Talking Lead podcast, so you're an official Leadhead now.
All right.
Yeah. And big thanks to all our sponsors again: Century Arms, Occam Defense Solutions, IWI US, US Palm, Fiocchi Ammo, and 212 Training Group. Go show them all some love and let them know how much you enjoy this. Maybe we'll get a season 3 out of it. So until then, guys, we're going to be stocking up with our ammo, making sure our AKs are clean and ready to go, and waiting for the next outbreak.
Not too clean. Not too clean.
Okay. There is a such thing as too clean.
There is. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to read this real quick, and I'll probably edit this out. So,
the question, right?
Yeah, the question.
It's a good one.
Was it on Instagram or was it on Facebook?
I believe Instagram. I saw it.
Here's the question, and I don't know where this came from, but we also have listeners on the Firearms Radio Network. So just a little tidbit: Firearms Radio Network subscribers, if you want to get the show sooner, go to our direct link, Talking Lead, on all the podcasting apps, and you typically get it a week sooner than everybody else. So if you find yourself missing out on these giveaways and contests, that's why. Bird Brain Industries. There is only one question, and because Lefty is a part of the Firearms Radio Network, that question is: would you rather have a nipple-sized penis or a penis-sized nipple? I don't get it. It must be some...
I can wear a sports bra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
Well, seeing how my wiener is nipple-sized, I guess I would rather have a penis-sized nipple. So it'd be the same thing, right? It's the same.
So there's a weird fact that the happiest women are with men with micro penises, which is like a penis-sized nipple. And my personal theory is that they know that they can't get it done with their dick. So they make sure and pay attention to their lady and make sure she's happy. And so I think we can all learn from this.
Or they pay someone who can. It reminds me of that movie. Was it the Bachelor? Not the Bachelor Party.
It was The Hangover.
The Hangover, yeah, the Asian dude.
With Leslie Chang, yes. Did somebody drop a peanut?
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Jeff still has not answered. He seems to be contemplative.
Yeah,
it's one of those no-win questions. You can't win.
It's a double-edged sword there.
Unless they're Farrah Fawcett. You guys remember Farrah Fawcett?
Oh yeah.
Are y'all old enough to remember her?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had a poster of her on my wall when I was a kid.
Oh, I had 2. I had to have a backup. Oh, perfect. Great show.
Well, way down into the gutter, so that was a good way to finish.